Rookie point guards can struggle to make an impact, but I have one key stat that tells you how Jeremiah Fears can help get the Pelicans back in the playoffs. It's the Monday episode of Locked On Pelicans. Let's go.
You are Locked On Pelicans, your daily New Orleans Pelicans podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to another edition of Locked On Pelicans, the daily podcast covering your favorite team, the New Orleans Pelicans in NBA, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, available wherever you get your podcasts and available on YouTube. I'm your host, Pelicans Insider, credential member of the media, Jake Madison, at NOLA Jake on Twitter. Here with y'all on this Monday. Summer League starts this week for the New Orleans Pelicans. We'll be, of course, talking about it right here on the daily Locked On Pelicans podcast. But today we are going to look at Jeremiah Fears. And I've got one stat that tells you how he can make an immediate impact for the Pelicans. And look, this is the reason they drafted him. I'll tell you what that is, how it can help them overcome a weirdish roster right now and what it'll do for the team overall. Then I want to get into shooting. Do they have enough? I'm not as worried about that as I am when it comes to other things. And then a couple of roster shakeups. What happened with Antonio Reeves? Who's on the Summer League roster you need to keep an eye on? All of that and more in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. Today's episode of Locked On Pelicans is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. And of course, thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We're here Monday through Friday, the #1 Pelicans podcast, covering everything you want to know about this Pelicans team. So please subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and join over 11,000 Pelicans fans on YouTube as well and become an everydayer. That means you listen Monday through Friday to the Locked On Pelicans podcast. And if you're an everydayer, let me know in the comments down below. And don't forget, you can watch us on the Gulf Coast Sports and Entertainment Network, same place you watch your Pelicans play, at 10:30 a.m. every weekday. So we're going to do a lot of Summer League coverage this week, throughout all of Summer League, I should really say. And I'm excited to watch some of these young guys play. And I'm, in particular, very excited to watch Jeremiah Fears play. If you're an everydayer or if you've been following along during the draft process, you know I was pretty high on him. Thought, one, he wouldn't be available there at 7 for New Orleans. When he was, I was thrilled about that. But I think this is a dynamic guard that can really help elevate this team and gives them the type of player that they have not had in a long, long while. We're going back to Chris Paul era. This is the type of guard they have been missing throughout Anthony Davis's tenure here in New Orleans and now Zion Williamson's tenure in New Orleans. And the Pelicans just added it in Jeremiah Fears. And look, you can point to the fact that he's not a great shooter, right? You can point to the fact that he's slightly undersized too and not like this pick. But I'm going to tell you the one stat you need to know. And this is what makes this pick worth it. This is what he's going to bring to the team that helps them get back into the playoffs. And that number is 51.8%. 51.8%. That is his free throw rate. What is free throw rate? Basically, it's your free throw attempts divided by your field goal attempts. It's just a measure of how often are you getting fouled and going to the line, essentially. And as one of my dogs goes crazy here, you need guys that can do this. This is how you beat a defense. You've heard Joe Dumars say this, but this is something that I've been kind of preaching the past year a little bit too. Shooting is important. And I'm big on shooting, but it's not the be-all, end-all. You just need guys that can attack a defense that are not one-dimensional. And in particular, the best way to do that is put pressure on the rim. By putting pressure on the rim, playing downhill, that's how you force a defense into rotations. And when your opponent's defense is rotating, you're going to create mismatches and advantages and be able to get good opportunities to score. You can have the court spaced as well as you want, but that doesn't do a whole lot of good unless you got guys that can attack a defense. And for the most part, past couple of years, it's been Zion Williamson putting pressure on the rim, and that's been about it, right? Brandon Ingram can hit mid-range jumpers, but he never really put pressure on the rim. That's one of the problems we had with his shot selection here. It was just mid-rangers, not threes, not rim attempts. And that's just taking what the defense is giving you. How about you put pressure on the defense and then create mismatches and advantages? There's an archetype in the NBA called advantage creator. Usually that's with guards, but you can kind of apply it to anybody that basically draws two to the ball. Zion Williamson is one of those guys. Jeremiah Fears is also one of those guys. When you kind of start to dive into this class coming into the NBA in terms of guard play and even bigs, Jeremiah Fears has one of the top, if not the top, free throw rate. When it comes to that, if you start to filter the stats and dive into all of the college basketball players, right? And if you're just looking at guys that are playing in top conferences and you're sorting them by the usage rate, and Jeremiah Fears played over 75% of Oklahoma's minutes last season, when you look at that kind of usage rate and then the free throw rate from that, Jeremiah Fears finishes in the top 10, top 15 when it comes to that. That's a truly impressive statistical group. He ranks out as 17 of guys that played 70% or more of their team's minutes at top conferences in terms of free throw rate, right? That's counting big men. That's counting all players. So to look at it from a guard, it's basically him. That's pretty much it. And when you look at it as a freshman, it's even more impressive. This is someone who plays downhill, attacks the rim, and puts pressure like basically nobody else in college basketball did from his position this past year. He got defenses rotating. By driving and being a downhill attacking threat, it draws two to the ball. He's quick enough that he blows by his initial defender, so someone needs to come over and help him, or you just got to put two bodies on him. That's going to create open looks for others. That's going to open things up for Zion Williamson a little bit, right? That's going to open things up for Jordan Poole, who's also a bit of a slasher at times, but also a good three-point shooter. That's going to create better open looks for Trey Murphy, for Herb Jones. It's just going to make life easier for everybody. You can point to the fact that Jeremiah Fears is not an elite finisher. Look, he's slightly undersized, so that hurts, right? But when you look at what he's capable of doing in terms of drawing fouls, getting to the line, he's a good free throw shooter. So even if he's not converting those and one opportunities, but getting fouled and going to the line, he'll make those. And then you're pairing him with an elite foul drawer in Zion Williamson. So this team can probably live at the free throw line or live in the bonus in a way that they haven't been before. You've had Zion Williamson be able to do this and get the team into the bonus early for a long time, but then no one else has been able to take advantage of it. That's been a part of the problem. The free throw line is the most efficient place to be able to score. When you look at it in terms of points per shot attempt or points per possession, free throw line is number one. Transition opportunities is number two. And then shots at the rim, followed by shots from the short corners from three. Took 4 different types of shots till we got to 3-point shots. Having a slashing downhill attacking point guard, 51.8%. He's not going to do that at the NBA level, but he can certainly play downhill, draw fouls, and get to the line, and that's just going to help this team overall. Pelicans have been lacking this kind of guard for a long time. I went back and looked at every season in free throw rate per their guards till I got to a good one. The last time they had a guard that was in the 40% or above range of free throw rate was Chris Paul's final year here in New Orleans. Monty Williams first as a head coach. That was the year I started covering this team. That tells you how long ago it is. That's the last time they had a guard at 40% or higher. Every other guard has been in like the mid-20s, maybe low 30s. So to have someone that can put this kind of pressure on the defense, even if he's not making the shots or finishing at an elite level, that's going to open things up and just help make his teammates better. And this is someone who actually is like better than you think at finishing around the rim. And when you look at the type of passing he does, this is the type of guy that doesn't just drive downhill and need to just draw defenders, get fouled, and go to the line. He can make the passes. And when you really watch him play, and I spent a chunk of the long weekend watching a lot more of his film, what he's got in the bag is not the most refined type of passes you've ever seen. But he gets them done, and it makes it work. And I think because you see so many times he's drawing 2 defenders to the ball, it's going to open things up for other guys. This is why the Pelicans drafted him, thinking he can potentially be an impact rookie early on. I'm really excited to see him in Summer League. Really excited to see him in Summer League kind of running the show and what he's going to be able to bring to the team. In tomorrow's episode, I want to focus a little bit more on Derek Queen. We're going to save that for tomorrow, but I wanted to focus on Jeremiah Fears here. So coming up next, so do they need more shooting, right? They need more shooting. Let's kind of talk shooting. That's coming up here next in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. Today's episode of Locked On Pelicans is brought to you by FanDuel. Summer sports are in full swing, and whether you're all about baseball under the lights, golf on the green, or high-stakes soccer action, FanDuel is the best way to make every game more exciting. Look, you're already following the action, so why not make it a little bit more thrilling? With FanDuel, you can get in on the game while your friends are getting sunburned at the beach like I was this weekend. So use FanDuel to track your favorite matchups, whether it's the Club World Cup, whether it's the summer golf tournaments. You've got tennis on grass in full swing right now, whatever it might be, MLB. Look, whether it's a same game parlay or watching a bet right into the ninth inning, FanDuel makes it feel like you're part of the action. So if you're new to FanDuel, that's even better because new customers can bet just $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. Just open the FanDuel app today or visit FanDuel.com to get started. And thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We are here Monday through Friday, the #1 Pelicans podcast, covering everything you want to know about this Pelicans team. So please subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and join over 11,000 Pelicans fans on YouTube as well. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. For your second listen, it's Locked On Saints with host Ross Jackson. You can watch him on the Gulf Coast Sports and Entertainment Network as well. He's at 10 a.m. every single weekday. What's going on with the black and gold? Ross Jackson of Locked On Saints. He's going to be traveling with the team to California for their practices and everything. Get the boots on the ground perspective over at Locked On Saints. Make him your second listen today. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. All right, so let's get into shooting. Is that the be-all, end-all when it comes to it in the NBA, or do the Pelicans need more of it? What's going on here? You know, I think one thing to keep in mind is, look, yeah, they're going to need more shooting. They're always going to need more shooting when you have Zion Williamson on the team. And you're just going to get open threes, so you need guys that can knock them down. But I want you to hold that thought for a second here. You know, I think one of the things you saw, particularly in these past NBA playoffs, is three-point shooting is not the be-all, end-all of things. Kind of was for a period of time, and that's okay. Things change. In a sense, the meta kind of adjusts in the NBA with what's working, right? The Thunder shot threes. Don't get me wrong. They shot threes, but you wouldn't call them a team like the Boston Celtics, who won the title the year before behind insane three-point shooting. And at times, even for Boston, you saw the three-point shooting not falling, and they look very, very mortal in a way that, well, other teams didn't, right? You know, when you look at the Oklahoma City Thunder, they weren't top 1, top 5 in three-point attempts. They were 10. Still a good number, in top third of the league, but it wasn't like they were leaps and bounds like better than anybody else. You know, they got it done through complementary pieces, depth, and defense too. And I think the Pelicans can learn from that, right? Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, their lead player, is not a volume three-point guy. He shoots threes and can make them, don't get me wrong, but it showed that, you know, as hard as it can be just in general to build a winner, and building around a star player that isn't a volume three-point shooter makes it tougher, it can be done if you have just guys that can attack a defense. And I think when we've looked at the Pelicans the past couple of seasons, they've had one guy that can really break down a defense and force a defense into rotations. They've had shot makers. Brandon Ingram's a shot maker, but that's not a guy that was bending a defense, right? DeJounte Murray can drive a little bit, but it's not the same as Jeremiah Fears. CJ McCollum, especially at his age, put up a 50-point game, 40-point game, but it's not quite the same thing as a level of Shai Gilgeous-Alexander or even Zion Williamson, right? So when you look at that, yeah, it makes sense that just get guys that can attack a defense and do multiple things well, and that's kind of what the Pelicans have done here. And I think that's important. And we're going to get back to free throw rate here in a second. You know, as long as you have Zion Williamson on the team, you're going to need some shooting, right? It's something you're going to need. But it's hard to do. It's hard to just put a bunch of shooters around Zion Williamson. And even putting a bunch of shooters around Zion Williamson is never going to space the court for him. The everydayers know what I'm about to say. If you've been with me for a while, at least the Zion tenure, you know what's coming here. I've long said this. I don't know if you can actually space the court for Zion Williamson. For someone that scores around the rim at the rate that he does, with his size, and gets fouled and goes to the line, is truly hard to stop. And when you look at his, you know, you can figure out what, 2-point percentage equals to 3-point percentage to kind of make the math work out. Look, teams don't come up with like complicated game plans for each opponent. They don't have time to do that. You put in one or two things, but for the most part, you're just kind of trying to execute your own game plan and force the other team to kind of bend to you rather than trying to counter them. When teams play against the Pelicans, they just go double team Zion. Don't let Zion score and we'll beat this team. When Zion scores at the rim at a 72% rate, and that's what he does, that's his field goal percentage there on average, that equates to something like a 48% shooter from three. Show me how many of those around the league exist. And even if you were to put a bunch of 50% shooters on the court from three around Zion Williamson, teams are still likely just going to take away the rim from Zion. If you're just playing the numbers, right, and it's Zion and a bunch of 40% shooters from three, the numbers say, let those shooters shoot open threes. Let's just defend Zion Williamson and not let him beat us. That's how teams have been playing New Orleans. So unless you can put a bunch of elite shooters around this Pelicans team, it's really tough to It's really tough to actually space the court for Zion Williamson just because of how defense is game planned for him. But what if you just put a bunch of other guys that can attack said defense? And I think that's what this team is looking to try and do. They realize they're not going to be able to put a bunch of elite shooters around Zion. We've seen Zion still be able to score even without elite shooters around him, right? Look, the dude was able to score next to Steven Adams, who doesn't live outside the paint at all. When you look at what he's done with some of the big men that he's played with, it's truly incredible and speaks to just how good Zion Williamson is as a player. So what if you just got guys that were constantly attacking a defense with enough shooting in the mix? You still have Trey Murphy, who's an elite shooter. You're going to have Jordan Poole, who shot better than CJ from three last year. It's 1 year out of their thing, so let's not only point to that, but look, did. If you can add another shooter too, Micah Peavy looks like he could be a three-point shooter as well. He projects as a 3-and-D kind of guy. Not that he should be getting significant minutes here, but this team does have some guys that can shoot at the very least a little bit. Derek Queen, projects that he could add that kind of shot to his repertoire as well. So they're shooters. Herb, 2 years ago was a good 3-point shooter. This team has shown that they can do it at the very least a little bit. Sadiq Bey has shown that he can be a good 3-point shooter. He's going to be there on the wing as well. This team has shown that they can at least get enough 3-point shooting up. You're just hoping they finish in the top 2/3, just not the bottom third like they've been doing. It's only a difference of like 2, 3, 4 more attempts per game, which this team, I think, can do. And Jeremiah Fears projects to be a good 3-point shooter too. But look, add those other type of things into the team here, right? Add guys that can draw fouls and get to the line. When you look at some of the free throw rates, leading the league last year that aren't big men. And I think that's kind of an important thing to look at, right? James Harden was 43.8%. Benedict Mathurin was 43.5%. Trae Young at 41% free throw rate. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander was 40.1 as well, below Trae Young. If you can get similar numbers to that, this team all of a sudden takes a massive leap forward. And look, I think that might be a little high to put on, a rookie. But can he get to like 35%, right? That's Stephon Castle level numbers for the San Antonio Spurs last year as a point guard. Like, that's a doable number, right? Spencer Dinwiddie, now at the Mavs, right? 35.5%, or wherever he ended. He's not on the Mavs anymore. I think he's on the Pistons, right? 35.5%. Those are some pretty good numbers, just looking at the list here, that I think are doable for a guy like Jeremiah Fears. So while, yeah, the Pelicans do need more shooting, if you can make up for that kind of scoring in other ways, and I don't mean just mid-range jumpers, I mean getting downhill attacking, putting pressure on a defense like that, I think it can kind of counterbalance that a little bit, and this team can still be pretty deadly when they need to. And so all of a sudden now you have more, just call it dynamicism. I don't know if that's actually a word or not, but you get the point I'm trying to make, that, this team can attack you in a variety of different ways, with some good shooting out there still, and the team has tons of room to grow. Also, by the way, I think when you look at adding these levels of like more than one-dimensional players, right, not just shooters, if Zion Williamson misses time, at least you've got some insurance or guys that can just get it done. Whereas, a couple of years ago when they tried to run the like not Zion-centric offense, it didn't work because they just didn't have the right type of players to do that sort of thing. Now, should an injury happen to Zion Williamson, we're hoping not, at least you have other options in a sense that you just didn't have before. And that's encouraging because, look, if Zion goes down, it feels like the season would get tanked, but there's no point in tanking, and they may as well try and be competitive because they don't own their first-round pick next year. It kind of ties into that and seems like maybe they're thinking beyond Zion Williamson. And that's, trust me, a show we're going to do because I definitely think that's something that they're doing. So coming up next, we got the Summer League roster. We're not going to dive into the whole thing today, but there's a couple things I do want to get into with it. We're going to look at that. What happened with Antonio Reeves? Where's Carlo Makovich? All that coming up here next in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. And thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We're here Monday through Friday, the #1 Pelicans podcast, covering everything you want to know about this Pelicans team. So please subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and join over 11,000 Pelicans fans on YouTube as well and become an everydayer. That means you listen Monday through Friday to the Locked On Pelicans podcast. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. For your second listen, Locked On NBA, where there's no offseason. Doug, Matt, Hayes keep you up to date on contract negotiations, rumors, and everything you need to be the most informed NBA fan. Find Locked On NBA on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We also are still doing Locked On NBA Game Night, even though there are no games, every single day, really focusing on Summer League. So if you just want general Summer League stuff, we got you covered over the Locked On NBA Game Night podcast, which is going to be a lot of fun. And I'm very excited to watch these guys in Summer League. Tomorrow on Locked On Pelicans, let's do a deeper dive on Derek Queen. I want to talk about how he can influence the roster and how I'm curious how they're going to use him in Summer League because I think that's going to tell us a number of things. But speaking of Summer League, we got some transaction news over the weekend, and this is not something that anyone needs to overthink, but that was the Pelicans were waiving second-round pick last year, Antonio Reeves. Part of the reason they did that is his contract was more or less becoming fully guaranteed soon, and you may as well waive him and kind of kick that down the road. You can still re-sign him later. You could potentially sign him to a two-way contract if you want to do that. But Reeves was cut, but the Pelicans in their, official Summer League announcement and everything have Antonio Reeves on there. I think partially they're probably still just trying to figure out exactly what they want to do with Antonio Reeves. Is it better to have a roster spot in the event of a trade right now? Maybe. But look, you could waive him. It was non-guaranteed. You can always re-sign him basically for the same amount of money to just not have to make that decision on him now and roster him the rest of the way while paying him. You know what? Kind of sucks for Antonio Reeves. I agree. But to do that isn't the worst idea, in my opinion, just to kind of keep all of your options and flexibility going forward. So that's, I think, what you're seeing from him there. He's on the Summer League roster as of now. We'll see if anything changes. And of course, we'll cover it here should that end up happening. What I think is a notable omission is Carlo Makovich is not on the Pelicans Summer League roster. I don't know what's going on there just yet. We'll probably find out pretty soon. I'd be willing to bet. He just might be he's in Europe, or it might be he's not part of the team's future plans, or he wants to go back to Europe after kind of spending 2 years, here, one with the G League, now last year with the Pelicans and not getting tons of minutes. Look, his archetype of a player of, a rim protecting 3-point shooting big man, that's kind of what he projects at, who's actually good in pick and roll situations as a short roll man, I think is useful. But one of the things you're seeing Joe Dumars do is just completely remake the roster. He inherited a roster that you can see Joe Dumars did not like and is overhauling it as much as he possibly can. And given the last year and people who wanted changes and things like that, look, you can't really fault him for doing that, can you? He wants to put his thumbprint, his mark on this roster, and he's certainly doing that. We'll see what ends up happening with Carlo Makovich, who is someone that I like and think could find the right role, but definitely, needs to grow as a player. Everyone kind of does. A couple other notes here before we wrap up this episode of Locked On Pelicans. Pelicans did sign Hunter Dickinson as an undrafted two-way guy. He was out of Kansas. Center, 7'2". He's on a two-way deal. He'll probably get some decent run here in the summer with the Pelicans. I would not be shocked if he's one of the starters out there for everything, especially at that size. Derek Queen probably at the power forward spot. So he'll be with the team here. I don't know, it remains to be seen. The Pelicans have made good use of two-way contracts the past couple of years as well. They also signed Trey Alexander-Guard, who is originally out of Creighton, but spent a chunk of last season with the Denver Nuggets. I like that pickup. He's interesting. On a two-way deal, I think that's actually a pretty smart move. When you look at how he plays, again, kind of can get downhill, can go out and shoot and score. I'm interested in what he can provide. 24 games with the Denver Nuggets last season. I think he's worth a flyer. Good size at 6'4" at kind of a combo guard position. We'll see what he's capable of doing with the team, but that was a smart move to just get someone with NBA experience on a two-way deal. They also have Lester Quinones on the two-way deal left over from last year as well. So he's kind of the final holdover of that group. He's going to be with them in Summer League as well. We'll do a full rundown of the Summer League roster probably in tomorrow's show when we spend a little bit more time on Derek Queen. Eve Misi is going to be there in Summer League as well. Micah Peavy, some of the names that you want to know. Summer League, we'll kind of do a primer on that of like, what are we watching for? How much should you take away from Summer League in the first place is also a big part of it because look, Summer League. But we're going to be watching. We're going to be covering every single game here. We're going to be covering it all across the NBA over on Locked On NBA Game Night. So make sure you are subscribed to Locked On Pelicans, Locked On NBA Game Night, wherever you get your podcasts as well. So that's going to do it for this episode of Locked On Pelicans. More on Derek Queen tomorrow. How should the Pelicans be using him in Summer League? What are we watching for? We got a whole lot to cover. I'm excited for it. I hope you're excited for it as well. As always, I'm your host, Jake Madison, at NOLA Jake on Twitter. This is the Locked On Pelicans podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And I'll be back with y'all tomorrow.